May DAG monthly meeting. Appreciate everyone being here. It's nice that you all made it even on this mediocre day outside. So we like to see you here. Before we get into it, we always go through a little bit of DAG business. First, my name is Eli Storch. I chair the design advocacy group. We've done many things over the years to get to know each other, going around the room. And one that we're doing lately is for me to start the clock at, say, 90 seconds and let you introduce yourself to the people adjacent to you. Say hi, why are you here? Talk to them. We'll be back in about a minute, all right?
Hello.
And when it gets too crowded, it takes too long.
Everyone's gonna have a relationship. I don't have a relationship.
All right, I'll bring you back up here. And of course, you can keep those conversations going later after the presentation. But let's talk about some advocacy items that are going on. George, do you want to kick us off, talk a little bit about Market East?
Okay. Market East, I'm going to mention University City Townhomes. We took a stance, as you know, on Market East about the arena, and I'm not sure we pushed the situation over to victory, but we're very happy with the result. And we now have the problem of planning Market East the way it should be planned. And there's a lot of work to be done, and we're trying to lay the groundwork for maybe, shall we say, the people's version of Market East. We're having meetings with Asian Americans United and some people from University of Pennsylvania tomorrow. And we're reaching out to others. If there's anybody here from No Arena, Washington Square, we'd like to talk to you also, people on both sides of the street. And the projects in the back room are on a site on Market East, on the so-called gimbal site, and they might merit a quick look. And I'd also like to thank Councilwoman Gauthier for her hard work on University City Townhomes. And we at DAG, we wrote a couple of papers about it and published them, which they wouldn't pick up. The official press wouldn't pick them up, so we published them ourselves. And we also conducted a couple of meetings with Ann Fadulin and others trying to get the project moving, and we're happy that it is moving.
Thanks, George. A couple other items. DAG did take a position on the CHOP parking garage that was recently at CDR. We did not like it. Fair to say we did not like it. The idea of outsourcing a noxious use to another community isn't a great thing to come across. And Dan Garofalo, who is a member of the DAG steering committee and sits on CDR, had some fairly choice words that I think had the strength for the moment. So if you read any of the reporting on that, Dan was really great. And we're hopeful that they'll reconsider. We're hopeful that if they don't reconsider, they'll make some significant changes to the plan. Unfortunately, it is an as of right plan, so that's not ideal. But they've agreed to have some meetings, and hopefully that will yield some positive changes, if not a rethink of the whole thing. Everyone's talking about the home program right now. We've had some hearings about it. DAG has not formally written or published anything on it as of yet, but I think it's on our minds. We were talking about it internally, and it will be interesting to see the continuation of those discussions in terms of where those priorities lie. I won't steal Councilmember's thunder if she has any thoughts that she's going to share with us tonight. And then I guess lastly, before we move on, just anyone you talk to, tell them to fund SEPTA. Anyone at all, electeds, anyone at the state level, just tell them to fund SEPTA. It's such an existential threat for our city. We do really need to get over that funding hurdle, just for basic service, because it is so essential for everything that happens here in the city that makes the city work. So I don't know that that's a terribly eloquent position to take, but do it. So we have a few events on our calendar, and one that will be on our calendar very soon. We'll be back here in 2 weeks with Angela Brooks, who's leading the mayor's efforts on housing. So she'll be here. This is DAG and the American Planning Association of Pennsylvania cross-promoting an event. So that'll be a really good conversation here. Leah Eppinger, who's the APA Pennsylvania chapter president, and she leads a housing authority. She'll be doing that one-on-one. So another Wednesday, 2 weeks here. And then June 18th, which is also a Wednesday, we'll be here with the whole team from, they're calling it 17 Market West. That's 1701 Market Street, the old Morgan Lewis building that's been converted by Altera Property Group into new apartments, and is a really interesting office to residential conversion. And then our wonderful programming chair, Marcia Moss, is working. We're gonna have Joe Siernick from SRDC in July. They just opened their wonderful new bridge. He's gonna be talking about the connectivity of the Schuylkill River Trail, what's next, what's coming, where they are. We are close to securing a date, and we have all the materials. So the second we have a date, it'll be up on our website, and you can take a look and check that out. So with that, let me jump right in here. We have Councilmember Jamie Gauthier with us, the District 3 council member who we like. She's got the planning chops, and so it's nice to have her at DAG, and obviously one of the leading housing advocates in the city. So appreciate your willingness to be here and say a few words to kick us off, and I'll let you take it away.
Good evening, everyone. It is an absolute privilege to be surrounded by fellow city planners and design nerds. I'm happy to be here to introduce the team that is leading the redevelopment efforts at PHA's Westpark site in my district, a project that I am very excited about. Because for me, this is what community-minded redevelopment looks like. As you know, our city and our nation as a whole has a complicated history with our public housing sites, to put it mildly. We ask housing authorities to provide safe and quality housing for our most vulnerable neighbors while cutting their budgets every chance we get. At this point, many of them are struggling just to keep the lights on. This is what I walked into at Westpark when I took office as council member in January 2020. At the time, PHA had put the site up for sale, offering unlimited development rights to any buyer that would come in and renovate one of the 3 towers to keep it senior housing. Aside from offering housing to existing Westpark residents who suddenly found themselves forced to leave their homes, there would have been no affordable housing requirements on the rest of the property, which is one of the fastest gentrifying and most desirable communities in all of Philadelphia, a stone's throw away from healthcare, family-sustaining jobs, transit, a grocery store, and so much more. So one of my first acts as a council member was publicly expressing my concern about the approach and putting forth the idea of a truly mixed income community development that offered a variety of housing options for people at different levels of affordability. And now, about 5 years later, we're finally on the cusp of breaking ground on the first phase of that vision. And none of this would be possible without Kelvin Jeremiah, PHA's leader. I will say that my speech criticizing the project on the council floor did not make for a good introductory meeting with Calvin. But 5 years later, he's actually one of my biggest partners in the housing space, and we have a great relationship. And even then, back in 2020, he did not back away when I pushed him on the project's approach, because he understands the value of permanent affordability and finding ways to achieve that as a goal, even as the circumstances around this work get more and more challenging. Kelvin also understands how unique and transformative this site is. Though it has physical challenges like its elevation and proximity to rail infrastructure, it's also the largest public land holding within walking distance of the economic anchor of University City, making it an ideal location for folks who want easy access to jobs and healthcare. I participated on an advisory committee with PHA and Westpark residents to review proposals. And that's where we all agreed that the team assembled by LMXD and M Squared should lead the transformation of this site, which brings us to today. The presentation you'll see today shows a vision that starts with a one-to-one unit replacement so that all households can return to Westpark with the same rental arrangement they had prior. But it does not end there. We are breaking up the superblock site, reconnecting the street grid, creating new quality public spaces on the way to the L station, and tripling the number of homes on the site, 60% of which will be deed restricted affordable housing. The cherry on top is that PHA is using a ground lease mechanism so that they remain the ultimate landowner and decision maker, a key step to ensuring the long-term affordability envisioned here comes to fruition. When it's all done, this will show us a new way to interact with the Market Street corridor, one that prioritizes human scale design instead of the deadening super blocks that have populated the area for decades. I am really glad, I'm really excited to be a partner and collaborator, and I can't wait for the first phase to break ground later this year. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ian from the development team to begin the presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Councilmember Gauthier. My favorite Westpark meetings are when she opens because it's mostly done. But we're gonna jump around a bit for the presentation. So we're just going to start with some quick introductions. My name is Ian Lundy. I am with the M Squared team, part of Westpark Community Partners, the development entity for Westpark. And Kim?
Hi, everybody. My name is Kim Bernardin. I am here representing LMXD, which is the partner with M Squared on the development side of Westpark.
And hi, everyone. I'm Marnie Burns. I'm a landscape architect and partner at Olin. We're the landscape architects for the project.
And my name is Drew Kometz. I'm with Erdy McHenry Architecture, and we're the architects for the project.
All right, fantastic. So up here we have a timeline that we always just think is important to anchor everyone in the whole history of the development, going back to 1964, when the towers were originally constructed, designed by John Harbison. And it really was a different design paradigm. And I think that anchors how it was thought of and what was intended, which was, these towers in the park that would have a lot of open space and have access for residents. And I think a mix of some design principles not being or playing out well, with federal funding being cut drastically across the country. You have a lot of situations where these super block sites have operational, safety, and really public health challenges. And so that's really, I think, what we heard a bit about the council member and how she approached the site. And I think we're going to repeat a little bit tonight because each of our perspectives brings kind of a different nuance to how we thought about some of these challenges. So apologies for some of that repetition, but hopefully it makes a more layered, interesting conversation about the site. So Westpark Community Partners started really with our initial response, which was actually drafted by John Cohen when he was at M Squared, but in 2022. And I think what we saw with our partners, LMXD, was a pretty tremendous opportunity to reshape how this site is connected into the neighborhood. So just really quickly, like she mentioned, target closing is this year. So we're really pushing for a Q3 closing to start construction and start delivering housing for residents in 2027 or early 2028. So to step back a little bit about Westpark Community Partners is we as a team bring really 40 years of experience structuring complex public-private partnerships that work with public entities to structure and manage financial investments that we think are pushing for the best spirit and the spirit of those public policies and the public design. So my firm, specifically M Squared, was founded by a woman, Alicia Glenn, who was the head of Goldman's Urban Investment Group, managing community lending, and then the deputy mayor of New York City for 5 years, managing the housing and economic development initiatives in New York. And so her thesis starting M Squared was, how do you create a development company and a real estate fund that's focused on a new kind of real estate, specifically a mixed income approach to housing. So everything that M Squared does is mixed income, mixed use, and sustainable development. We do this across the country. 3 specific examples in Upper Manhattan. This is our Inwood site, a partnership in Linwood with the city of Linwood, just north of Seattle, and a project in Dallas, Texas, where we're utilizing Public Facilities Corporation to do a public-private partnership with that housing authority. Each one of these projects is at least 50% affordable to households earning 80% of AMI, and is also utilizing public and private resources to structure the investment. So I just wanted to focus on that piece really quickly, because a really important part, we're going to talk about the design today from a physical perspective, but making Westpark a success is also really contingent on the financial design as well, and how we can work with a lot of different partners to structure the right kind of investment. I'll hand it to Kim.
Yeah, so LMXD has a lot of similar values to M Squared, which is one of the reasons I think this partnership works so well. LMXD is focused on mixed use and mixed income housing developments, usually focused around transit and often with a cultural anchor. We are our sister company of L&M Development Partners, which has a 40-year history of building affordable housing in New York City, but LMXD's focus is really on mixed income, so the value to to everyone in a mixed income community and the economic uplift that it can bring. So we wanted to talk a little bit about just a few L&M and LMXD example projects in our history of rehabs of towers, which we'll get into in this presentation, and of enduring public-private partnerships. So this is an example of our Baychester project. So you can see the before here. It's a partnership with the New York City Housing Authority. So similar, a RAD conversion, which we'll talk about a little bit, similar financial structuring, and allowed us to kind of completely reinvigorate a disinvested public housing site in partnership with the city. So we think that's a really great example of the type of work we like to focus on. This is another one. This is in downtown Newark. So it was actually originally built as a parking garage in 1920, which we did a gut renovation of, and it's now 200 units of mixed income housing in downtown Newark. And a really successful, it's not a public-private partnership, but a successful, really complicated financing structure in terms of how to bring public and private investment together to create something new, which is now a really successful community. One other example that's really relevant here, this is our Banner Lane project. So it's in Washington, D.C. It's a partnership with public agencies in Washington, D.C. And it's similar to Westpark. It involves a return home aspect. So formerly public housing and still public housing around the new buildings, but was redone to be denser, just allow more people to live there, a mixed income community where the original residents can return. So that was another thing that, we've brought to Westpark, and we think will be really successful here as it was in DC. And then lastly, this is another great example of renovating an existing, tower. This was a Mitchell-Lama Tower in New York City. It's now 1,000 units of housing. This one is fully affordable, not mixed income, but a good example of how we like to try to be really creative with reusing these existing towers to try to save money and help us create affordable housing with less subsidy. So hopefully that gives you a sense of LMXD and kind of sets the tone for how our partnership has worked here.
And well, not in Philadelphia, we wanted to focus on those projects because each of them, I think, are precedents that our firm has brought, and those same principles have to a great extent reached their full vision in the design for Westpark. So the future as envisioned for Westpark starts with the community it's in. So what is the neighborhood context? What are the constraints? Westpark is so interesting and was so interesting to us because not only is it a super block, but it's a super block that almost has walled off these amazing resources around it. A long-standing practice of M Squared is to really try to bring economic integration and mixed income housing to high opportunity areas. And it doesn't get more high opportunity than the Westpark site directly to. I'll start in the Southwest with the SEPTA station. The L stop is a critical anchor for transit-oriented housing. You then have directly next to that an Aldi, a grocery store. So you have affordable nutrition right there on the site. You have the Enterprise Center who runs some fantastic workforce and economic development programs throughout this community. To the north, you have Lee Cultural Center. So we are actually building housing on a park. And so there's an amazing question of one, how do you approach public space on the Westpark site? And how do you connect to and make sure we tie into this amazing public resource, both the park as well as the Lee Cultural Center itself? You then have, and I think this is particularly fascinating, and from an opportunity perspective, you have the Locke School with K through 8, you have a middle school, you have a high school, and you have a community college, all a couple blocks from University City. So the full spectrum of education and education opportunity is available, and it really doesn't end there because you also have CHOP directly to the west as well as PHMC. So for us, the Westpark site is just a question of this is such an important place for more housing to be. How do we design that housing correctly? How do we break up the super block? And how do we reintegrate? So looking at the particulars of the site, I think some of the things we're really focused on starting from the top, the entryways to these buildings were really closed off. They don't open onto the ground plane. And so there's a question for us from a design perspective of how do you bring a human scale to the tower rehabilitation while also opening up that ground plane? This staircase is, let's see if this works. Wow. Sorry. This staircase is right now really the main ingress and egress point of the campus to get to the SEPTA stop. So that was one, it's dangerous, it's poorly lit, there's low visibility, and it's not accessible. So rethinking that stairway is one of the primary theses of the development. You see it was designed really, despite being in an incredible walkable dense area, for cars. So you see a lot of the entryways really thought of from an auto-centric perspective, something else we want to fix. And then in the bottom left, a lot of the greenery there that is there, which is a pretty tremendous amount of green space if you go walk the site, and something we're trying to channel in the landscape design for this, is overgrown and not managed and difficult to use. And so how do you think of a more human-centric approach to the green space that we do have? And then, the SEPTA is both an opportunity, but also something that cuts off the campus directly as SEPTA comes by the southern border. So how do you think about integrating the site with that in mind? And this is our, you're the first people to see this. So very, very excited. We just updated this rendering. So this is really our new vision for a mixed income connected community at Westpark. It's a mix of typologies, bringing townhomes, which in our resident engagement was something we heard really, really loudly. Residents wanted to come back to townhomes. They wanted the optionality to either be in the renovated towers or the townhomes. We have a new mid-rise here, which I'll show from another perspective in just a second, but it's an important way for us to add density close to the transit stop on the same plane without that grade change. And then, of course, the first of the 3 tower rehabilitations, and all connecting to SEPTA. So to speak quickly about the actual program that we designed in partnership with the community and the Housing Authority, like I mentioned, the whole campus will have a mix of typologies between bringing townhomes to the site, adding mid-rises that can really help us deliver the density needed here, and then the rehabilitation of the high-rise towers, which help us, 1, from a density perspective, 2, from an embodied carbon perspective, and 3, just to create some pretty amazing views for the residents that will get to live there. One other point on the lower part is that we have over 50% of this campus is delivered as 2 bedrooms and larger. So a focus on housing that can accommodate families, moving away from, I think, a lot of the new development in this neighborhood that's focused on student housing. So that was a big priority of the housing authorities and our design for the space. And then As the council member shared, the first priority here is 1-for-1 replacement housing. So 327 housing units were here before, 327 units dedicated to returning residents will be here as part of the final program. We also wanted to extend that deeply affordable tranche. So an additional 73 units, getting us to 40% of this campus, will be designated for individuals with incomes up to 50% of AMI who have and are recipients of vouchers through the Housing Authority. So they're not just the land partner, they're also a partner and kind of maintaining the voucher housing that we have on the site. We then have another tranche of moderately affordable housing. So these will be between 40 and 60. We might get up to 80 if we work out the income blending with the HFA. And that'll be an additional 20% of the campus, making for that 60% of the campus that is deed restricted affordable housing. And then new unrestricted housing. So a critical component of mixed income is having unrestricted workforce housing that is going to be at rents that are targeting levels that are between 80 and 120% of AMI. Those won't be restricted though, which helps us on the financing structure for the project. Really quickly, this is the first phase. So this is what we've been working and have been through the design process on, and we're looking to close on later this year. So these will be 3 independently financed transactions that are moving together. There's a lot of, complexity in how we structure that, but that's a different talk that we'll do, I'm sure, at some point. So to focus on the design, these are just some quick slides about other principles that inform the development, interconnectivity, working with the council person on a new street network that has new ingress and egress points into the community. Making sure that we're really investing 25 million of infrastructure throughout the site, which will undergird the additional housing, so not overburdening the existing housing that's in place. Integrating open space, we'll have approximately 4 acres of open space that we're designing in as Olmo connects up through the campus, and embracing principles of sustainable design. So building off of our approach for rehabilitating the existing tower to reduce the embodied carbon, also integrating solar, the tree cover, and exploring geothermal for the later phases.
Neat. Okay. I'm gonna go up here. Yes. Okay. This is working. Yes. Okay. You need to see what I'm talking about. Great. So just talking more about the site, I think I could talk about the site for hours. So I'm just going to try to talk about a few things here, but happy to chat after. So a few of the things that Ian touched on, but I'll go through more, thinking about the connections. Really, it's all about the connections for this site. Some of the places that we're thinking about in the outdoor space, and then thinking about the environment, which you could also substitute that word for sustainability or climate resilience or any of those number of things that have to do with keeping us healthy and keeping our world healthy. There we go. So as I think you saw a little bit, there's sort of this bigger master plan, but then there's also phase 1, which is what we're hoping to build this year or start this year. So as I go through, I'm kind of going to flip between these two things because there's the principles that cover the full master plan, and then we're getting to kind of test them out and design them in phase 1. And so connections. The site is really kind of an island. It's very fascinating to me as, someone who really likes reading a site and learning about a history of a place. But if you just look at it, it's kind of has a lot of green space right now. It's very different from the rest of the city grid, different scale. And weirdly, it's like it's very high. It's about, 10 to 20 feet above everything around it. So very curious. And so if you look back, it was actually part of this Pennsylvania Hospital for the Insane. Really interesting history. It feels weird to say I'm inspired by a hospital for the insane for this site, but this was kind of groundbreaking at its time. This was one of the Kirkbride hospitals, and he really felt that the environment that people were in could actually help heal them. And so it wasn't to lock people up, it wasn't to shut them away, but really this was a healing place, and he really used the landscape itself as part of that healing activity. So these are all, if you could read the words, it says, the pleasure grounds of the Pennsylvania Hospital for the Insane. So a lot of space for people to get outside and be in nature and even work and garden outside. And I think a lot of these ideas are coming up again today. But really the other thing that makes it an island are the edges. It has walls, it has berms, it has barriers, it has fences, it has buffers, and the only real place you can come in and out, does this work? No, wrong thing.
Red line.
Sorry. Oh, I went too far. Way too far, sorry. Sorry for the preview.
Everyone close your eyes.
Yeah, okay. That's really the only, in and out right now. So back to this. And so part of the, idea of connecting, and I want to say reconnecting, but it was never really connected, right? So we're connecting for the first time. And so, thinking about keeping that one entry right now, and then connecting up to Haverford, connecting to Lee Cultural Recreation Center, and really connecting to the SEPTA station and to Market Street itself. And so in phase one, that's when this Market Street access will happen. The other one should have been pink too. Access to Powelton Avenue will happen in phase one too, but the others to the north will have to wait for the next phases. And so this is what it looks like on Market Street right now. The stair that Ian was mentioning is kind of behind this mass of vegetation and these walls. And I think this sidewalk is not accessible. It's so tight, it's really just hard to get through. And so this is our, proposal and what we've been designing and what will be constructed to really open up that space, take down those walls, and to excavate a lot to really bring down the life of the site down to Market Street level. And that's basically more than a story of a building down to street level. So you can see here, this is kind of just a little overlay to show it's about a 20-foot grade change right at that corner with that mean little stair. And so the idea is to really open that up, bring a commercial space or retail space down to Market Street. And then also think about how can we design a ramp as a place so it doesn't feel like an onerous circulation way to get up to the site, but really is a place that can be activated, can feel easy to get through. There's also a stair, so if you want to go faster, you can, but has seating, has shade, has places for events to happen. So this is just a few little views of that. This is down at the plaza, so you can take the ramp up, you can rest, or you could take the stair, and then just looking down. And then we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but also, the planting strategy is really to use lots of native plants, lots of plants that are tolerant of drought, don't need too much water, and use lawn, but kind of sparingly, because we know lawn is not great for the environment and for our climate. So you'll see that. Okay, then connecting within. So really thinking about, instating a street grid to break up the site, to create access to new buildings. But how do you get through the site as a pedestrian? Because as we know, the cars are really only coming from this way, but the pedestrian access wants to be this way because that's where the SEPTA station is. And then this bigger site has always been a barrier, for all these neighborhoods around here that might want to get to the SEPTA station. They can't really go through here. They have to go all the way around. So now we're thinking about how can other neighbors, come through this site and use this place too. So it's not just for Westpark, but it's for the surrounding community. So just a little bit about the streets, really activating the streets. We know streets are really important public spaces for Philadelphia. And so thinking about how to use those things here. Oh, and also really prioritize pedestrians with street safety, like raised tables and things like that. I think I'm going long, so just a little bit about the places, between all of these buildings and all this density. really creating lots of little public spaces, well, some little, some big public spaces for the people that live here, but also for the community, and how those spaces actually kind of form this chain up through the site and help reinforce that connectivity through the site. Again, going to the site, it's very curious. It has these kind of remnants of this pastoral life that it used to have when it was the hospital site. And so again, looking back at these maps, you know, there was a vegetable garden that was 3.5 acres. There was the gentleman's pleasure ground. There was the ladies' pleasure ground. There was a 10.5-foot high wall around the entire thing. But again, thinking about, you know, the landscape, nature being part of, you know, what keeps us healthy, what keeps us physically well. We know there's a lot of, you know, health issues. I think West Philadelphia is disproportionately burdened by asthma rates, obesity, and so a lot of these connections to healthy open space could help with that. And sorry, just a photo of everyone out in the pleasure grounds, pleasuring and healing. So when we're thinking about the open space, we didn't want to just do pastoral, right? That's not really what we do anymore. That's not kind of how people live. So we really started to think about, you know, we kind of need this gradient of public space, but then also private space, more resident oriented. How can people feel like this is also their home, not just this place for everybody else? And so kind of thought about this gradient of uses and program. And so this is kind of how it's happening in phase 1. This is once you get up to the 20-foot elevation of the site, you're kind of in the little nook of the mid-rise building, and there's a play area. There's kind of a terrace that secretly functions as the fire lane, and is all kind of framed by bioretention areas and planting and shade. And again, in front of the first tower that's being redeveloped, there's a big flexible lawn, some shaded seating areas, and then closer to the building, a resident patio barbecue space. Okay. Last is the environment, which I said is lots of things. So I think just the one thing I wanted to touch on is, you know, we know everything's getting hotter. Philly is getting hotter, and we definitely have urban heat island issues in Philadelphia. And there's, you know, association with our tree plan and trying to combat some of this. The denser we make things, the fewer trees they are, right? Like, so you can see the lighter tones are kind of like Fairmount Park, that's cooler. The darkest tones are where it's really dense. But we need density because we need housing, we need affordable housing. And I would say the other thing from a landscape architect who cares a lot about biodiversity, building denser in the city helps save the habitats that are not currently developed elsewhere. And so we need to be doing this, but we need to do it smart. So we're trying to figure out how do we balance, you know, shade in the city, open space, stormwater management, and things that will make people's lives healthier and more resilient. So have a robust planting strategy. We have stormwater gardens throughout the site, trying to treat a lot of that at the surface, but also make it an amenity. And then, you know, one thing that is just exciting to me is thinking about material reuse because, you know, to minimize the carbon footprint. There's this really cool wall that is under the septic tracks. So, you know, right now it's blocking things off and you don't really see it, but we're thinking of kind of dismantling that and reusing it in gabions to retain everything around the ramps. So I'm very excited about this. And there was concern that we'd have to like break all the mortar off of the stones, but mostly they don't have any mortar left. So I think we're okay. Yeah, so I think I'm going to, so you can kind of see how that, you know, we're trying to keep the walls pretty low, but they wrap the ramp as you go up and sort of tie back into the history of the site. I think with that, I'm going to hand it to Drew. All the mics.
He's gonna try and use the stationary one.
Oh.
This one's on? Okay. Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you. Once again, my name is Drew Kometz, and I'm with Erdy McHenry Architecture. Our firm has been working with both Westpark Community Partners and some other organizations in West Philadelphia for about 5 years, rethinking parts of West Philadelphia, including the Westpark site itself. So I won't be able to take you through that entire history in the time I have available. I think working with Westpark Community Partners, we got up to scheme 14D or so of different master plans, which was a lot of fun to go through. But as you can imagine, there was a lot of considerations, as you've already heard from the rest of the team, that we took in putting the project together. So I'm just going to highlight a little bit more of the history that I don't think Marnie necessarily touched on. And then I'm going to go through some other considerations about putting the master plan together. Philadelphia has a long history of developments. Marnie talked about the time of this site's history as the Kirkbride Center. You can see now how it's kind of being influenced by the spread of the University City complex, which is maybe not the most affluent neighborhood of Philadelphia, but it's very rich and developing, and makes the site subject to gentrification. So that was definitely a concern for the design team, is to come up with some reasonable mitigation and balancing of those natural desires to redevelop the site, but to kind of keep it true to some of its history and to equity in the community. Even going back farther, there's been remnants before the development of the Kirkbride Center and Native Americans who inhabited the site. I think Marnie touched on a lot of this. So this is that time as the Kirkbride Center. Maybe one thing we didn't talk about too much is the SEPTA line. So originally it was a trolley line running down Market Street, and then it got constructed as an overhead line, which you can see now existing west of the site. So in the 1950s is when the impetus to take it underground. So maybe unfortunately for us, our site was chosen as a place for that transition to happen. So that's where we have the big sweep coming in, and the rest of the line eastbound then continues underground to Center City, and the original above ground structure remains westbound. So this site was built in the 1960s, about 62, I think it was inhabited around 64, 65. It's a quintessential towers in the park plan, which by the 1960s was starting to fall out of favor. It was really a product of the New Deal in the 50s. I think people were already starting to recognize some of the problems with it. There were definitely a lot of forces probably pushing towards it. The efficiency of building one more story on a building is a lot less than building a new structure. The efficiency of land use, the cost per unit. I've even seen it read that maybe the hubris of the architect could have had something to do with it. These are Harbison buildings. But this is the site that we have now to work with. So we're trying to, we tried to work with the team on figuring out the most appropriate solution to this challenge. And there are some really beautiful things about the site. I mean, having a high rise at that location in West Philadelphia, you do really get some amazing views from above. This is a rooftop shot of one of the buildings. And the buildings themselves have some very interesting architectural characters of the time. But, the last, not doing math, 60 some odd years probably haven't been super friendly to the building. Graffiti has taken over. The buildings are now completely unoccupied. The balconies were maybe a little ambitious and had been covered over to kind of deal with some tenant issues. I was going to say something else that I can't remember. So we'll move on. So some of the things about analyzing the site that I don't think the rest of the team touched on yet tonight. We looked at planning, circulation, placemaking, sustainability, culture. So, this is a real transit-oriented development site. There's a lot of actual stops on the L line, and there's a lot of other mass transit lines that run through here. We looked at reconnecting the grid. I think Marnie talked about this a little bit. This was kind of originally a single bucolic site, and we're trying to introduce parts of the street grid that make sense to reintroduce it and make it more connected without totally kind of chopping it up. And in part of doing that, we looked at some other street examples. We were really drawn to some of the smaller streets in Philadelphia, Alfred's Alley, Latimer Street, Camac. And, we took that in inspiration because we had to lay out, a new street grid that could service the buildings. We had some excellent partners at Langen who eventually informed us that fire trucks need to get down streets. So we weren't able to make quite the degree of quaint streets we might have been looking for, but I think we came up with a nice solution. Those streets are multimodal, they have green infrastructure in them, and they do let fire trucks, protect our buildings when needed. One of the other things that I think our team latched onto was West Philly Porch Fest, which I think goes, which you'll see, we tried to reinterpret in one of the building types, the townhouse types. And I think it also just talked to how the community can define itself. I was reminded recently that sometimes community can actually be a term that's exclusive, like people can make communities that are small and insular and not dynamic and diverse. But we thought that the West Philly Porch Fest is a good example of how community is really about meeting other people where they are. I think we showed this slide before, but as I said, laying out the infrastructure and geometry of the site, we did really try to make a lot of park area and open area and kind of minimize the built area. So we had some pretty strict unit counts to meet with the Westpark team, which Ian presented earlier. So getting 1,000 units, we kind of went through a balance of putting those in the existing towers, some mid-rise structures that are kind of maxing out the efficiency of that 5/2 podium construction, and then the townhouse typology that a lot of the existing residents were really drawn to. The existing structures, well, they're big and there's a lot of them. So I think as you heard the council person say, one of the original proposals was to demolish 1 or 2 of those and only leave 1 for senior housing. And it's been quoted and misquoted and said a bunch of ways, I think, but the greenest building is the building you don't have to build. So I think when our team got involved, we really looked strongly and advocated for figuring out a way to keep the buildings with all that square footage available. I think the 1960s construction and its austerity probably helped us a little bit. I mean, the ceiling heights aren't quite what we would want, but there wasn't a whole lot of miscellaneous construction to get rid of. For those fans of architecture, some of the original plans are just an amazement to look at, all hand drawn from Harbison's office. So this is a very short summary of a lot of analysis our team did, but looking at all the embodied carbon in the existing brick, the concrete, the steel, and how we could enhance the energy efficiency and thermal envelope of the building to kind of approach what a modern building would be without having to invest all of that new carbon into it. And then this is where we landed off. It's just another version of the plan Ian showed for phase 1 and phase 2, which I think the rest of the team has pretty much talked about at this point. So now we'll talk a little bit about the actual architecture of the buildings. I don't know that we went into too much description, but we have building A, building B, and building C in phase 1. Very creative naming structure. We had a lot of things going on. We kept the naming pretty simple, but so building A is the first building in phase 1 that's a mid-rise construction. It's podium construction, 5/2, wood over steel. And I think what, we properly had some budgets placed on us, but I think we've worked really hard with the ownership team and the rest of the consultant team to come up with a pretty interesting massing that has some variety to it, and also kind of has some intricate details. Here's just an example we have where we're working with the same brick pattern, but turning it around a little bit. We've integrated mechanical system into the overall window design, and we have some other materials. So I think we're trying to work within economies of scale, but produce a pretty aesthetically pleasing result. Marnie talked about it on the site. So building A is at the southwest corner of the project, where we're carving out that 20 feet to get down back to the Market Street elevation. So what we're doing inside the building A, is to also allow that connection to happen. So you can see outside the windows in this image is the terracing of that grade outside. So we're kind of have a 2-story lobby in building A that's emulating that inside. Building B is the existing tower renovation. So this is essentially an entire gut and reclad. So it's not clad over. We're actually taking the existing infill brick and window panels out, and we'll be the new. I have an image coming up here that goes over that a little bit better. Yeah. So we'll actually be leaving the existing slab edge there and doing more of a curtain wall type of installation past the slab edge. So that's kind of optimizing the new thermal envelope of that building, getting a couple extra square feet, I guess, while we're at it. And then the last building to talk about is building C. So these are the townhouses. There are actually 4 different structures of them. They're either 2 stories or 3 stories. And some of those are, well, technically none of them are townhouses because it's a multifamily building, but some kind of have that design where you walk in and the first floor and second floor are yours. And then we've also had some that are flat on the first floor and just to walk up as a separate unit on the second floor. So really offering a real variety even within this seemingly repetitive elevation. And once again, we kind of worked with the palette to add some variety. There's recesses between the building. There's some framing and brick detailing around the windows to add some aesthetic interest. And I think maybe there's another image, but this is then our interpretation of that porch concept. So there are these planted retaining walls at the property line, but then there's also a 3-foot kind of private sidewalk zone. So there's kind of an approach to the building that's very public. Then there's a semi-public, semi-private zone, and then there's the actual recessed entry, which would be private. So we think we've done a.
We started wanting stoops, and then we were quickly told those are not ADA, and so they got flatter, and then the square footage requirements got smaller. But we worked hard to retain something in the vein of private, separated space.
Yeah. And yeah, these are this is that diagram of how the units stack on top of each other. I think that's all I have. I think we're going to do questions. And do you want me to put a different slide?
Yeah, can you put up the rendering in the middle? And I think a couple notes on the design, just from our perspective, because we're at the Center for Architecture, that we thought were interesting. Is there's a couple challenges with what materiality do you want to focus on? How much do you want that materiality to be the same between the different elements and typologies of the campus? What can you pull and borrow from both the existing site, from the institution that was there before? And I think for us, the key piece there was brick, but also how do you build a new brick building on a public housing site that doesn't draw back to a really generation of building these brick buildings that aren't thought of as safe. And so that's where we came with the architecture team to some of these distinctions, right, of having a difference in color, materiality, step backs, trying to really work to have a human scale entryway that feels new, that feels open, that feels light, that integrates with the site, but also pulls from some of the more traditional brick and material that you have throughout the neighborhood. For building B, the tower rehabilitation, this one's really tricky because we need to have this deck stall paneling that comes in and can be prefabricated and installed on site. And that doesn't look very good as brick. And so I think that pulled us away from some of the more contextual natural materials that you have in the neighborhood. And so then the question was, okay, what do we like about the existing towers that we can bring to the fore? And I think for all of us, something that really stands out is the verticality of these towers is really unique and it's really interesting. So how do we have a vertical design that really pulls the eye up, that's unique, that it definitely juxtaposes with the other buildings on the site. And so that's, I think, where there's a bit of a subjective, how do you interpret that? But at least it was how we were trying with each of those typologies to bring something from what was there, but also push it in a new direction and try to create a coherent and cohesive campus that I think really importantly doesn't feel like a campus. We want this to feel like West Philadelphia. We want this to feel like you make a turn. And I mean, we actually got a great comment in one of our last public meetings that the easternmost street should just be called 43rd Street. It should just continue. It should just tie into the community. And I think we're all on board making that shift of how does this feel like it's just part of Philadelphia and not this isolated space. So some of this juxtaposition is stark, especially because townhomes are short and these towers are very tall. But those were all the design questions and complications that we thought through and we, like Drew said, battled through it at some points. And we'll continue to think about for the later phases of this project. But thank you all so much for listening to this presentation on this.
So if anyone has questions, please put your hand up and I'll come around.
How's it going, Jeremy? So phase one is the 327 units, and is that all the replacement of the affordable units? And do you have the LIHTC credits already awarded?
Yeah, so phase one will deliver approximately 130 of the replacement units. I think based on PHA's kind of historical pattern of the initial phase of residents coming back, that they think we wanted to solve for them that what their anticipation of everyone who in the first initial phase would want to come back, we would have the ability to accommodate that approximately 30%. And then the full 327 will be across all 1,000 units and all phases. I think an important thing is this 327 units is close to the total unit count for this first phase. So we are in this first phase delivering a similar number of housing units to the community. And then yes, the 9%. So we didn't get in because you asked the fun LIHTC structure. So each of these is a different tax credit application structure. And for the two, for A and B, the tower rehabilitation, they're both 4% structures with a integrated affordable component that's intermixed with the market unit. So we have a market component and an affordable component of the building that are two separate entities. Only the affordable piece is the LIHTC entity. So those two 4%, have been, we'll technically get our reservation after the board meetings, but the 9%, which is the townhomes, that cluster of 41 townhomes is the 9% award has been, delivered.
So you talked a lot about just the sheer volume of open space you're retaining. Can you talk a little bit more about maintenance, programming, how you deal with that much open space? Because that is one of the hard parts about having that much planted, wonderful open spaces. You have to maintain it. You have to do programming so it's activated and engaged to a certain extent. And what your plans are. I know Nate's sitting over there from UCD, wondering how if they're going to be up here having to do maintenance and how that all works. And if you could just share.
Is that an offer? Or I mean, the answer is one, the right budget. So having a robust OpEx budget that includes the cost. Two, working. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about the property management partner that we work with. And so we are going to work with Greystar here, who has a property in the neighborhood, the Clark on 43rd, and also LMXD has worked with on another site that has a large scale campus. And they also really have a lot of experience with large campuses throughout the country. So working with someone who is experienced, understands that maintenance, and has informed us on what the cost will be and how you make sure that's in the base business plan. And I think there's another element that I'll let Marnie speak to of trying to create less cumbersome and intensive maintenance requirements.
Well, I was just gonna say, you know, when we were doing the planting plan, I made Graystar get on the phone or on a call, and I said, look what we're doing. Is this okay? Can you handle this? And they said it looks fine. So I was surprised. There was no pushback, but yeah, I mean, I think part of it is definitely, you know, trying to be low maintenance, you know, drought tolerant plants, but there's always maintenance. So I think we're just trying to be make sure that the, you know, managing partner is kind of along for the ride and understands what's expected.
And a lot of like little decisions. So like the water feature in the playground, I think if you want to, like, that's an example of choosing a lower maintenance.
Oh, that's still maintenance.
The recycled, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's like a ton of little decisions along the way, but the water feature, you know, instead of a big, we wanted to add a little bit of a water play element, but instead of, you know, a big recirculating system that needed a lot of filtration, we're using just a pretty small kind of self-activated or kid-activated system. So it's like uses a lot less water, but also doesn't need all that, you know, high tech, you know, high maintenance and filtration systems. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you. I've got two questions. Hopefully they'll be quick. Do you know what the construction budget is for phase one?
I wish I didn't. Yeah, we do. It's approximately 200 million.
Okay, got it. And do you have a construction timeline for phase 2 and 3? Like, do you know when that's supposed to begin?
Do I know when it's supposed to begin? We have a target. So we put the initial application for the first 9% of phase 2 into the HFA this year. So in this tax credit application cycle, the goal is to close on phase 1, have that under construction, and then really commence the design process for the second phase, which will hopefully be, call it 12 to 16 months after construction start of phase 1.
Okay, I know I said two questions, but I do have a third. Are you doing anything to, like, is there any noise mitigation that you're adding in regard to the train? Is that even a concern?
Very much a concern. I think there's a big habitability question, especially because those are all townhomes that are in the first phase, because so many residents wanted to come back to the townhome typology. The first phase of townhomes are all affordable, so they are not a mixed income structure, which we will and are hoping to integrate into the later phases. I mean, I'll let both of you, I think, talk about the sound mitigation approaches and strategies.
Yeah, I can go first. So the team did retain an acoustical engineer and vibration engineer, so that was all looked at, and we are for a number of the financing, we do need to meet thresholds for that. So we did make some minor adjustments to the building. The reality kind of is that it's a city and the background noise is relatively loud to begin with. So it's not quite the same as a train going by in suburbia when it is in Philadelphia. So
that will be addressed in our marketing materials. Urban grit is.
But I think there's a lot of planting, which, you know, wasn't necessarily analyzed, but does do a lot too.
Well, yeah, I think so. Planting's funny. Planting doesn't really help block sound very much, except for like perceptually, right? So like if you don't really see it, you like hear it less. But so there's a lot of planting to try to help like the visual buffer, but I don't know how much it will help sound.
Hi, so I also have two questions. Very curious about the zoning process on this. You know, because of the density and just kind of working with the community, I wonder how you kind of arrived at where you arrived. And I'm also very interested in the townhomes because those are also like historically kind of tough to develop too. So if you could talk more about the townhome portion. And I guess 2.5 questions. If ADUs actually had anything, if that was kind of brought up, because I think
accessory dwelling units.
Yeah.
Oh. I'll start with the townhomes and I'll pass it to Drew to talk about our zoning process and how we thought about eligibility in the the TOD and the MIN. I mean, the townhomes, it starts with, this was a real mandate of the Housing Authority based on feedback from the residents. And so a priority here is replacement housing and what kind of replacement housing is wanted. And a lot of residents have seen some of the more successful Housing Authority redevelopments, and they've brought townhomes to those communities. And there's more, the perception of more private space. Drew touched on this, but it is a really large barrier in master planning a site when you need to lay out approximately 120 townhomes throughout the acreage. And that, I would say, creates a fixed constraint, but we were all committed to that. And it was something we and the Housing Authority wanted to prioritize. So I would say the development of the townhomes was really about how do we lay this out in a way that starts to mirror some of the streets you have in this community. And then how you build them economically is it's a challenge. This is a very expensive project to construct, and there's less economies of scale with a townhome typology. And so you have to make sure that you have public partners who are, if that's the public demand, we're working with those public partners, the HFA and the Housing Authority, and the city is specifically made an award for the construction of the townhomes to make sure that they're economically as well as physically feasible. And the zoning.
Sorry, what was the specific question about zoning?
I guess, like, how do you land on density? I don't know how the zoning was or how the parcel was, but how do you kind of land?
Yeah, so once it's been consolidated here, it's about 12 acres. And as Ian just touched on, it has both some TOD and MIN overlays. So we had kind of FAR to spare on the site. So really the limitation was that, the type of typologies we wanted, the unit mix we wanted. So yeah, we didn't really have a constraint. We did have to go to the ZBA because there's, it's a very unique site, and I'm surprised we didn't have more things that just didn't fit the formulaic zoning code of you have a frontage. Like, where is the frontage of this project? So that's what we got dinged for, not having a building on the frontage, because no one could figure out where it was.
So if I understand this right, and I might not have been paying attention to the part, but all three of the original towers are going to be preserved. From the looks of the photos, they're going to need some serious reconstruction. And it seems to me that they're also somewhat outdated for maybe modern tastes. First of all, my question is two parts. One, first, will they be 100% affordable as they were before, or will they be mixed rate? Two, what kind of reconstruction will be taking place on them?
Yeah, so the base plan is to try to, for the reasons we've talked about, rehabilitate and keep the existing towers. We wanted to start with one and understand what that construction process was like, what the design is like, where we can get with the city, and then what the actual cost considerations are. So that's what's included in the first phase, this first tower that you see in the foreground. And then we'll be doing similar analyses with the city, with the Housing Authority, and with public partners for the later two towers. But the base plan is to really work to try to maintain all three on the site. I think your second question is a matter of how do we make these more current has been the big question. So one is the floor to ceiling heights in here are pretty small. So it was really being very targeted about not having any drop ceilings, especially in living spaces, making those really isolating them within the kitchen areas where you need that kind of utility and lining to come in. So making pretty specific habitability decisions within the units themselves, really embracing light, really opening up the windows, really integrating floor to ceiling windows to open up these units, really take advantage of things like the views that help modernize them, and then have an interior design that is similarly really focused on opening up the campus. So you're less focused on, being in a smaller, older built space. We didn't have a photo of it here, but on the ground floor, there's actually a whole community room and residence center that fronts a kind of private separated deck, and then open space. So you have these great windows that look out onto a public park. And that will also be where we'll have our service provider, hosting community events, connecting with residents. So I think those are just the variables we tried to address to keep it modern. And the answer on what kind of construction, it's everything you can imagine. So it's a full scale gut rehabilitation, going down to the core structural
really
elements.
Only the concrete superstructure is going to remain. All new mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, recladding over the whole thing, new roof. So.
Oh, thank you. It's a mixed income. So similar, so this will be 50% affordable and 50% market. That 50% affordability will be a blend of the replacement housing voucher units as well as the non-replacement, but still affordable LIHTC units.
Hi, this looks really beautiful. So thank you for your presentation. It's going to be really exciting to watch it unfold. Was there anything that either the residents or you as designers wanted to incorporate but just weren't able to because of site constraints or financial constraints or any kind of constraint? Anything that stands out as being left out? I mean, there may be many things, but anything in particular that you'd like to mention that you wish you could still do?
Maybe we all get one, because there's a lot. I think mine will be just a matter of, this process has both been very long and everything's moved very quick. And one of the things I think with a site this large, it is a really interesting opportunity to explore a geothermal ground source heat pump system. It's not something we were able to work in from a cost consideration, from putting together the civil analysis perspective on phase one. And I'm hopeful that we can find a way in later phases. So that'd be my one that I'll choose.
Talk about Nehemiah.
Yeah. Oh.
I guess there's one that's just interesting, maybe from a professional perspective, working with communities. There's a sense all along that this needs to get reconnected to all the neighborhoods around it. And so there was a plan to connect the grid also to the west into the Nehemiah Homes community, and would have made the site much more connected than it is right now. But that little neighborhood did not want that to happen. And so we had to take that out of zoning. And it's interesting because if you walk around in that little neighborhood, it's pretty small, but it's this cute little pocket, and you could understand they don't want more traffic coming through there and all that. So it's definitely a tension because it would be better, but it's also understandable. So.
And I think we're maybe going to try and prove them in phase one about how much we're going to offer that they're going to maybe want it in later phases.
There is no connection in
Yeah. I don't know. I've blocked it all from my memories, I guess. One that's coming to mind is maybe a roof deck. I think we talked about before. I think there were also some neighbor concerns with that, but I think I showed the one view from the roof, probably not the roof of the high rise, but even the roof of the 6-story mid rise, I think could have been a pretty special space. But we do have pretty.
Roofs went away.
Yeah, the green roofs too.
Yeah.
Good question, though. I like that.
The only thing I would add, we didn't speak about it in depth, but an opportunity for the future. One of the great things about this project is we're only on the first phase, so we can learn from it and hopefully build more into the second two. But financing sources, this is such a transformative, amazing site. I think there's a great opportunity that when phase one is proven out, that there could be other sources of money to help fund and make the next two phases even better in terms of design or amenities that we're able to offer, or additional affordability or whatever. I think, it's really powerful actually that it's 3 phases so we can see it evolve.
Many projects with complicated site plans end up having a discussion about parking. And I don't think we've heard one yet. Can you comment on what your discussions have been? Because of course, I don't think you can afford underground parking and certain other amenities that might occur at very high densities, but can you describe a little more about parking?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely cannot afford underground parking. And so I think starting with the zoning, we look at what's required and then we try to ask questions about what's going to be demanded or wanted. And so, we actually have a pretty low base parking requirement here. Drew, we're at, do you remember that?
I want to say 67.
Okay, so something like, 67. And so I think the base was a question of we'd have to integrate that throughout the site. And then what other opportunities are there? I mean, for us, this is first and foremost a transit-oriented development. So the design is focused on how do we make it easy to take transit? How do we make it how do we facilitate the connection point to that transportation station? We also have bike share stations around the site. And so how do we work with the city to make sure those are staying there, see if there's a reason for an expansion to our site. And then in our base operating plan, how do we look at incentives for residents to not use cars? How do we look at partnerships with SEPTA? How do we look at really incentivizing alternative forms of mobility as the starting point, and then getting to some people are definitely going to drive. And so there's really the existing parking that we have, which will be part of our operating plan of as people come and lease up space as available, we'll assign those. And then we have built streets that are to the city's requirements and also have street parking available. So there will be a street parking network available also to accommodate drivers as well as visitors. But I do think this is an ambitious effort to build a site that's really, call it walking and transit and biking first.
I was gonna say, I think the min overlay had some.
I just wanted to add that we did multiple overlays at the site, a TOD overlay, and then the mixed income neighborhoods overlay that took down the amount of parking required as well.
And it was 61. I checked my cheat sheet.
You talked a little bit about that the geothermal had been planned for the project and we couldn't do that. But my understanding is that you're hoping to do it in later phases. For the later phases, what I was hoping is that there's something that could be done in the construction phase now so that you could potentially tie into the loops that you would be able to install in the future to do a network geothermal. I mean, it would be horrible to have to come back in the second and third phase and demolish part of the work that you had done. So what can be done at minimum cost to tie into that kind of thing later on?
At minimal cost, it's always a fun caveat, but we are building these all electric. So all of these buildings will be electric. I do think with geothermal specifically, the mechanical question, you need to make that upfront in the design process. So flipping the first phase to a geothermal system, I don't think will be feasible. It's just some decisions you have to decide at the inception of the development process. And for this one, that was a decision we needed to make. So I think if we are able to study it and incorporate it in later phase, it will be for those phases and for the heating needs of those phases.
Yeah, the type of mechanical systems we selected for A and C specifically, wouldn't even accept the ground loop at this point, unfortunately. So we took.
To be studied. Network, obviously ideal, but based on cost, feasibility, trade-offs are real, unfortunately. And that was one of ours.
Hi, and thanks for your presentation. I'm sure this was a complicated effort. The former life of some of this campus had, unfortunately, a lot of crime. And I wondered if any thought was given for the whole campus to have some additional security.
Yes, so one of the big concerns we heard from the community when we engaged, I think, both previous residents of the housing development as well as the neighbors was around public health and safety. So there's a lot that has gone into the thought of we'll call it public safety of the site. So starting with the design, starting with the layout, we've really tried to make clear lines of visibility. We really tried to focus on the site lighting. So embracing best practices in crime prevention through environmental design. And then shifting to the actual oversight mechanism. So this will shift from being a public housing security site to being within the Philadelphia Police Department system. So there will be a different level of accountability, which was what we heard, something that was wanted throughout our engagement with the community. And then the buildings themselves, one of the biggest things, and we try to root these decisions in what we hear when we talk to people who've been there, who were on site, who have that history. There was just a lot of questions about access. Will you have cameras? We want there to be cameras. Will you have controls on access points? And so we really work to build those in so that the people who live in these buildings are the people who have access to these buildings, and that we're responsive to what we really heard in the community engagement. So there will be, I think, hopefully a holistic approach to making sure that people feel safe and secure on the site, starting with how we designed it, moving to how we oversee it, moving to who's actually, we'll have patrols who are part of and operating at the base level of each of the two larger buildings with a lobby and a 24-hour person who's really there as a monitor, and enhanced security, lighting, and access control systems throughout.
Well, please join me. Let's thank this whole team. Really appreciate them coming in today to share with us. Please thank Councilmember Gauthier for joining us, taking time out of her schedule. We are in the middle of our DAG Housing Month, so Angela Brooks will be here in 2 weeks. So get your tickets, they are free. So we'll be back here May 28th. So look forward to seeing all of you back here in a couple of weeks. Thank you guys again.